Okay, so it looks like it's time to get started here. Get the music down and get the proper camera up. So welcome. Thanks for my second ever, or I guess my second in a row Thursday night stream. Going to continue doing the ink swatching of the couple of Montblanc inks that we didn't reach last Thursday, and then do all of the Pelikan Edelstein inks that I have, which I have 6 different ones. So we'll make our way through those across the 6 papers. And I do have a different camera for the overhead view tonight, so hopefully it's a little bit clearer and it doesn't stop multiple times throughout the stream. So let me switch to that camera. And just we'll kind of get started. And to start out, oh, welcome, Christy. Oh, and hello, Autism Musician from the Learn to Learnings channel. That was a fun time to join that stream the other night. So here's what we're starting with. This is my ink swatching A5 plotter. And in here, I've been doing 6 different papers with all the different inks. So I have a good side-by-side comparison point. So we'll get that put aside. And these are the ones that we did last Thursday, the Montblanc inks. Just so you can see the differences, and then we'll do the last 2 that we didn't get to, and then move on to the Edelstein. So if you're not familiar with how I've been doing this on the stream, I'm doing 6 different papers, which are Iroful, Life Bank paper, Tomoe River 52, Yu-Sari, the Nimacine paper, and then just some regular plotter paper that's kind of their stock paper. Having that, those 6, so I have a good representation of papers that I use on a normal basis, as well as, they're good reference for pen clubs or shows or things like that, to be able to just hand that plotter over to someone and they can look at the little annotation on the bottom to see which paper it is and how the inks perform on there. So just to give that little bit of side note, so let me try doing this and see if my cameras cooperate. So the 2 inks that I have left for Montblanc are the Montblanc for BMW, which is a nice blue, probably one of my favorite blue inks. And then this is the Santuan, and I should have brought the name up. Someone brought it in the chat last week. The Antoine de Saint-Exupéry commemorative special edition Montblanc ink. So we'll be doing the swatching with those. In terms of swatching tools, I use just one of the glass stirring rods. And then for writing the name on the of what the ink is, I'm using my ink thrower from the Pen Addict with a Colorverse shuttle nib in brass, so I can get the name written in a nice crisp, clear line. So let's go on and get started. And feel free to ask any questions as we go in the chat. I can see it pretty well as I'm going, so I'll be glad to answer those to the best of my ability. And if not, there's other people who are normally in the chat who I might throw one to them if they're more experienced in some things. If I see that they're here, just, always want to get the best answer. So we're going to start with looks like the plotter paper. And I'll go on and start with the Montblanc for BMW. And I do hate that this is one of the special editions that comes in the smaller 30 milliliter bottle instead of their normal special edition, because it is one of my favorite color blues, or colors of blue, that I have. So, and just a side note, if the music or anything like that's too loud, or if the audio gets screwed, please let me know in the chat and I'll do what I can to correct it on stream if possible. And I almost forgot, one of the most important parts is how I'm keeping these in order. Is, Autism Musician, you can ask in here. There's a lot of people who are probably watching who are not just fountain pen people, but also stationery users who might have a good answer about pencils, papers, you name it. So go on and throw it in there and we'll see if we can get you an answer, because there's a lot of people who use all writing implements of all the different sorts. Okay, so I got the grid underneath so that this will all stay in order now. So we're just putting it in there and getting a good swatching sample across, and already that blue just looks so good on the paper. I hate that I love this ink so much, and I don't want to use it too much because I don't think I can easily replace the bottle. And that's the part that makes me sad because it is one of my favorites. So, and then let's get that shuttle nib in there, get some of the extra off. Okay. So that's paper 1. And I did get an extra little like folding TV tray to have to the side to put the papers on, so a little bit easier to let them dry without conflicting. Good eraser for colored pencils. I'm sure there's one, but it would probably, just with my knowledge of colored pencils, the type of colored pencil might also come into play, because certain ones are meant to be blended versus erased. So if you're a colored pencil user and you're in the chat, if you have an answer that might be able to help Autism Musician, that would be great. I don't have a good answer on that one because I only dabble in colored pencils. I know that with my watercolor stuff, I have some of the kneaded erasers that if you haven't tried the kneaded rubber, that might be one to try, where you kind of almost warm it up essentially and it lifts off the paper in a different way. And it would also, I think there's a lot of variables in there. So it's probably going to be a little bit of trial and error to determine which one is going to be the best for that. Yeah, I think most erasers that come with things in general are there to say they have them, but if you're truly getting into a specialized thing like colored pencils, there's probably a better tool to choose to go along with it versus what's included. It's like almost like they can't sell it without having one there, but yeah, I have some of the big white erasers, but I also have the kneaded rubber. They're like a gray. I don't have any of that near my desk at the moment where I could grab one out of a drawer, but it's a different style of eraser where you kind of knead it up. And if you're on the stream next week, I have a couple of artist friends who are big in the color pencil space. So I might be able to find an answer, or I'll mention it if I'm able to join in on the Learner for Learners stream this next Tuesday. Okay, 2 more papers for this first ink. And looking at this bottle as I'm putting in the swatching stick, I don't even know that I'd be able to fill a pen by dipping it in this bottle. It's getting to that low of a level, so it would probably be a syringe fill or something like that. It does kind of look like clay autism musician. It's kind of like it feels like you're using silly putty or Play-Doh almost, or modeling clay, but it's an eraser. Okay, the last paper for this first ink here. Okay, so let's get this bottle closed up, and then I'll show how I've been cleaning off I'm not cleaning the glass stirring rods because I have plenty of them for tonight. But let me get this off to the side, and I'll show how I rinse for the first one, you can normally just dip it in the water, but I'll go on and show here. I'm just using a little water spray bottle and just spray down through the little slits in here to get all of that ink out of the slits. And then the important part I found with this shuttle nib, I have it right here, it's just I use these blue shop paper towels. They're a little bit more durable that you'd find in the automotive section of your store, just to dry off the water that might still be in there so you don't put extra water in the next ink bottle that you're moving to. Just kind of dab around there. It's pretty absorbent, and there's not all that much room inside the nib itself for the water to stay, so it's not going to be 100% perfect, but some is better than nothing. Okay, get this back over to the side. So then this will be the final of the Montblanc inks. And on this one, I'm actually not going to write the name because I didn't look it up in advance. So I'll swatch it and I'll just add that word or the name on these sheets when the stream is done, just to be sure I'm putting the correct name on there. Okay. First calendar book. So just for writing down like an appointment style calendar book, and did you get, have you ever used one before? You say your first. Is it your first in a long time? Because I know most of us had to use them in school in some way, where if you get into the stationery hobby, this is planner season. Yeah, so kind of just a general planner and notes book. I'm currently using the plotter system for that. This is the time of year when all of those the new releases are being announced and coming out, and people talking about what paper's in them. Because if you're not familiar, if you use fountain pens or you're in the stationery side of things, paper is just as important as the pen or the ink. So you want to be sure you have a good paper to kind of, it's like a triangle of three important parts. So just always something good to remember. Okay, yeah, a 6 month or a 6 ring. That's what I use. I use an A5 size 6 ring, and then for my pocket one, it's known as Bible size, which is actually just a Japanese delineation for paper in the US. Sometimes you might hear it referred to as Filofax, personal size, or executive size. Those kind of come back from the late 90s, early 2000s, the Franklin Covey, or when Filofax was really popular. And that's when I started using towards the end of college, and then after college, I used a Filofax Personal. And I think that's why I ended up coming back to that Bible size, because it's small enough to carry around with you, but enough room to keep track of things adequately. No, it's always great to learn and try new stuff, because what you're using now, you might try it and say, you know what, this isn't exactly the right thing for me. Just reaching over, this is my little Bible size plotter, or Filofax Personal size, that I carry around with me everywhere. I can make notes in here, and then I have a larger one that I keep on my desk for work, that I can transfer appointments or things like that into the larger, easier to view on the desk calendar if needed. Okay. Let's move on to this one here. The important thing, though, autism musician, is, it's great that you're doing pen and paper still. If there's something about that's, for me, I find it easier to remember things if I write it down. I know not everybody's like that, but I've always been, if I write it down manually, I'm going to remember and keep track of things much better. It's nice to have that separation from not being as reliant on computer or phone, things like that. This is a nice color. It's kind of when it dries, we'll see it better, but it's almost like a black cherry. See if I can, now that this camera should autofocus as I raise it up. Yeah, you can see that color in there as it's starting to, still pooling, drying, but it's a nice black cherry-esque color. Okay, and on to the last paper for this last Montblanc ink, and then we'll move into the Pelikan inks. No, that's actually a really common thing. Now, journaling or writing down, using more analog is sometimes a therapy type thing as well, to write down and keep track of things. So that's not surprising that was suggested as a way to try and keep track of things, if that's something you're wanting to work on. Being able to write things down, it triggers different parts of your brain. And while I've never been diagnosed, I think I've got little bits of ADHD. I can't stay still, and I like to fidget, and I collect hobbies. And when I do a hobby, it's all or nothing, as you can see from starting a YouTube channel and getting into the craziness of all this. So, it's something, that mental part of, keeping things in order has always appealed. So, okay, I'm going to let those dry, and we'll look at all the inks at the end. But for now, let's get new papers. And I should have been using my blotting card. I didn't even think about it with the other ones there. But this is all the new papers, and as you can see, and switch to, I just have what the ink manufacturer is written across the top. And then on the bottom of the sheets, if it'll focus, in pencil, I have what paper it is, so people can use it as a reference. So let's get started here with, And actually, before I do that, I need to clean. Like I said, I don't need to clean that off because I didn't write the names. But I do want to set these papers off so I have spot for the new ones. Okay. We'll put the rest of the stack here, and now we can get started. So this first ink I'm doing is, I've had this for quite some time, and this is a great ink for vintage pins, or pins that are a little bit more finicky. Pelikan 4001, it's kind of a standard. It's a drier writing ink, a good blue. There's other ones in this series, but normally when I hear 4001, I think of the blue itself. Then got this on here so I can see all the focus or the lines. Grab another glass rod here. Okay, so let's get this new sheet started. And this first paper is the Life Bank. One thing I like about these bottles too is they have a nice wide opening. So regardless of what size pen you're trying to fill, you can easily fit it in there. Now, since Pelikan makes things like the M1000s or M800s, it makes sense to have a bottle with a large opening. Yeah, Rahul, I started journaling in like 2013, and that's kind of what led me into the fountain pen side of things. Started with a Pilot G2 because that was the go-to pen, and then I found the fountain pen in the drawer, and I actually have a video on my channel about how I kind of got all into this, and then I kind of found I liked it. I don't do it every day. I do it more the end of the week to kind of dump my brain on paper and kind of start fresh for the next week. Sansa vintage gel pens. Interesting. Yeah, I love fountain pens, but as much as I love using them, I've been really enjoying exploring all sorts of other pens like rollerballs and whatnot, and I just realized on these couple sheets I didn't write the ink on there. I was sitting here talking. So let's go on in. Get that on there. Yeah, this last vacation my wife and I took for our anniversary in April, I took along, I picked up a new hobby, bought watercolor stuff, and tried watercolor painting for the first time. So that was a whole different, kind of adjacent to the stationery hobby, but I really enjoyed it. It was a different type of focusing to just draw, or paint something that I'm seeing outside the resort in Jamaica. That was very interesting to me. No, this music is nice. Normally, when we were talking about journaling, I'm a big movie soundtrack person, but for royalty-free-esque music that you might use for during a stream, all the good stuff like that, you can't really play without risking getting dinged on copyright. So jazz is kind of the next closest thing that all of it's going to be very similar, because while I grew up playing classical music for many years, there's some classical pieces that might come up that can be really jarring compared to the previous piece, where jazz kind of has a different level set, I think, overall. And I did not curate any kind of playlist. This is literally just, I'm using Epidemic Sound. Went on, typed in jazz, and hit shuffle and random. So this is what we're getting, but so far so good, it seems. Okay, so this is on to the plotter paper. So Autism Musician, I have a video that I'm currently working on that'll come out in the next week or so. If you have an interest in trying to write in your calendar with fountain pens, this whole week I've only been using entry-level pens. So some of them are like $6. You can find just about anywhere. And it's been very surprising of how great they work and perform. And they're like entry-level starter pens, which has been a fun experiment for me to only use. I think, one brand is $6, the other entry level is like $14, but they write great. It's kind of makes you realize you don't have to spend hardly anything to have a good writing experience, regardless of what your tool of choice ends up being, fountain pen or rollerball or anything like that. Okay, 2 more papers for this first ink. And I will say hello. I know that they can't respond in chat, but friend Anne, who is driving down to Houston to go to a stationary event from San Antonio, they sent me a message earlier saying they'll be listening along on the stream, even though they can't reply because they'll be driving. So thanks for that. I think I've found it interesting while doing these to be able to kind of narrate the chat alongside, which is kind of fun as well. So that way, if someone is just able to listen, they're able to kind of hear. Thanks for dropping in, Needle Girl. Hope your class goes well. Always appreciate when you're able to stop in. Okay. So that's going to wrap up the Pelikan 4001. The most important part, close the ink bottle before doing anything else on the desk so that we don't create... Yeah, CY... Oh, Rahul, that's interesting. What part of Houston are you actually in? I grew up in Houston. So I know CY was at Drum Ghouls. I grew up what I guess would now be closer to Little Craft Place in the Spring area. Is where I spent the first 18 years of my life. Okay, get this over and... It's been quite a while since I've been back to Texas because family has since relocated to outside the Atlanta area. But last time I was there, I didn't even hardly recognize the area I grew up because it was a completely different look with all the development and whatnot. I guess that's to be expected over 20 some odd years. Okay, my parents I think technically I lived in Sugar Land when I was born. That's the area that my parents, they were like Rosenberg, that area. And then I was in Spring pretty much any time I remembered. So I think shortly after I was born, they relocated further northwest. But definitely a small world when it comes to Tennessee is like that too, though. Autistic Musician was referencing a stream I joined in the other night about just some audio stuff that was suggested on YouTube that day. And then one of the people in there, it turns out they live 20 miles down the road from me here, something like that. You know, it's kind of crazy. Okay, so the next ink that I grabbed, pop it over on the side camera here. Well, I got move that over so I can show this a little better. This one is the Aquamarine, the Edelstein. And even though it says Edelstein, you can see it has the Pelikan logo on the bottom, so it's kind of like a subset. It's like the next tier up. So the 4001 might be their starter ink. This is their higher inline, but not high end to the level of being crazy expensive. It's a great, well-performing ink. And this size bottle is what they normally give away at Pelikan hubs if you're going to one of those. Now this year, there's been question in the community of whether or not they'll be sending ink for the hub. That'll be in October. So I guess it's just going to be a wait and see thing for that. Now, Rahul, is there going to be a hub in your area of Houston? I'm sure Houston will have one, but Houston area being as large as it is, it could almost easily have 2 or 3 with decent attendance, I would think, just due to the size of the city. I was asking if you're doing the Pelikan hub in Houston, if they're going to have one that's closer to your area, or if it's going to be probably down and around the Dromgools, like inside the city area. Hey, Lisa, thanks for joining. And Lisa, there was a question earlier that you might have an answer to. I don't know. Are you a colored pencil person? Autistic Musician was asking about a good eraser for colored pencils. And I am not educated enough on the colored pencil side of things to have a good recommendation. So Rahul, today is actually the last day that you can go sign up for Pelikan hubs. If you're not familiar with them, Pelikan, the pen company, puts on these events where you don't have to own a Pelikan pen. It's more of like a little bit larger pen meetup, and it only takes like 6 or 7 people in a city to request one. Normally, any city with a larger pen shop, I think the website is pelikan-hubs.com. You can go and sign up, and it's normally a free event where you can go attend and you get to talk to other pen people and hang out and play with pens. That's actually where the first time I met Olive Octopus in the chat, she's in the local pen club, was at the Pelikan hub last year. So that goes for anybody on the chat. Today is the last day to sign up, so it's timely that if you haven't, go to look up Pelican Hub sign up, and there might already be one confirmed in your city. And if not, you might be able to, you might be the last person needed for that city to become a hub and get to have one of those events. Yeah, that was my recommendation, was the kneaded erasers too. I have one that I've used a little bit with my initial jaunt into watercolor, but I just don't know well enough if that's going to work. Oh, yeah, it might have been today, German time. So, if you have a pen club or something like that, or if you're on any of the online communities like the Pen Addict Slack or things like that, reach out, because I know we missed the sign up last year for the Pelican Hub, and we were still able to go and attend and had a great time. We didn't get the free bottle of ink, but as you'll see here in a minute when I get to it, there were a few people who didn't show up, so we did end up with one of the bottles as well. So, if nothing else, it'd be a great way to meet other pen people around you. Okay, just a couple more papers here. In this aquamarine, I actually have the pen that matches this. When I bought this, I bought it as the set. Pelikan releases normally pen and ink combo sets with like their kind of entry-ish M200s with a matching color body to the inks. So that's a nice way of having a color matched pen, if that's your thing, to have a perfect match to fill up a new ink. I think it's part of it. From when I signed up, it was you put in what city you would want to attend it in, and that was, I think, how it went. So it's just, I assume they have some sort of like geographic area around of where a hub will end up being that you would be included in. That's what I was asking, because Houston is massive. It's kind of like, I'm sure New York City, they could easily have 2 or 3 just due to their size and number of people. So it's not as large as that, but similar principle. No, thanks for stopping in, Autism Musician. Hopefully you were able to get some help with your eraser question, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next Listen for Learners group as well. Okay, and that's going to wrap up the aquamarine. Shuffle this around a little bit. Okay, this next one is actually, speaking of Pelikan hubs, the olivine. See, hold it up to this camera and see if it'll focus correctly. You can see the olivine there. This was from the first Pelikan hub I went to in 2016 or 2017, I think. And it's a nice green that I did something the other day and I was like, man, I forgot this was such a good color. Because that's one thing that happens the more inks you get, especially since when I wasn't an ink swatcher when I first got into pens, and now I'm making up for lost time, but it's like I'm rediscovering hidden gems in my existing collection, which is nice. Saves me from having to buy new ones, and I almost made a huge faux pas there and put the dirty dip pen into the bottle of ink. So let's correct that. Luckily I caught myself in time. Okay, get this dried off here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm not holding it too much off camera. Okay, so I need to make like a little sheet that I can stick off camera on my monitor of the order that I'm doing this in, so I don't almost make that same mistake again in the future when switching inks, because I would hate to ruin an entire bottle of ink. Sure, I would not be the first person to have done that, but I've had pretty good luck until now, and I have not done it yet. Not saying it won't happen at some point, but I'd prefer not to have it happen if I can avoid it. Sorry, I had to grab a drink there. My throat's getting a little dry. It's one thing when doing streams, you don't realize, I work from home, so I'm on calls every so often, but talking on a stream is very different, where the conversation is one-sided, responding to things in chat and whatnot, but you're talking the entire time and you're not really dividing up the conversation. Okay, that was the Yu-Sari. Yeah, Houston is one of those, especially having Dromgools and Little Craft Place. I assume they're kind of one of those cities that would probably almost always get one, because having stores that sell, I believe Dromgool sells Pelikan. That's an easy button for them. But there's been people who have been talking about wanting to get a more localized one, and that's where I think the number that's needed is like 7 or 8 people in an area where you might be able to have one, not in a major city, which is great for, people who can't travel to those places, or their city is not big enough to traditionally get an event like that. Like you were saying, Rahul, most of the big events are probably more Dallas for a lot of things in Texas, or Austin, Houston. It's practically another city by the time you drive across it. I do like that olivine, or I don't know if it's olivine or olivine. But look at that green. It's like a nice... Come on, focus. Maybe it doesn't want to focus because that there. Sorry if that's shaking around a little bit. That color's just drying in such a nice shade. Once it's fully dry, I'm sure it'll be even better to look at. Okay, let's continue on here. You know, are you talking about the ink, George, or are you talking about... Because there's places that'll ship it here. But it is, you know, there are advantages to not being able to go in and pick stuff up. Or, you know, disadvantages depending on your theory. Because, you know, going to Gentleman Station or Butler Stationery and just walking around and seeing what's new, that's always a great way to find cool stuff that you didn't know existed or you didn't know that you think you needed it. Yeah, impulse buying, it unfortunately it's kind of easy in this hobby because there's, you know, you don't want something to not be there the next time you go if it's the hot button item, like the, you know, I don't think the Canopus paper that Gentleman Stationer got, I don't think he had any idea how quickly there would be such a demand and sell out on something like that. It's kind of new, and then all of a sudden blew up and just disappeared everywhere. Although my wife just finished her draft on her next book, and she asked if we're going to Gentleman Station tomorrow because she wanted to get a congratulation present to herself for finishing that. So, yeah, like you're saying, Rahul, there's something to that, you know, congratulating yourself for whatever it is. Health scan, finishing a project, finishing a book, you know, making it through the week and not yelling at anybody, whatever you need, you know, find your reason and then pick up the new shiny things. Well, and George, buying the inks, Montblanc inks are actually really good. And price-wise, normally they're not priced crazily like the pens. Now, I own a single Montblanc pen. There's only one other that I might like to own at some point, which would be like a early 80s 149 with an extra fine nib. But other than that, I'd much rather get a Maker pen or 6 compared to the price of a Montblanc pen. Oh, the inks are great. And with you being Nashville, George, you know, we actually have the pen club meeting Saturday. I'll be more than happy to let you look at the swatches or bring you a sample if you're able to come to pen club. Lisa, I don't know if you're able to drop a link in to the pen club website, so George might be able to get some more info if you're not familiar. We actually have a really active pen club in Nashville. A Maker pen would be made by an independent maker. So, like I have pens made by Sean Newton, by Nick Pasquale. The maker closest to you, Rahul, someone talked about it, would be Dave Dollar. I think he's in the Houston area who does custom pens. Actually, that was the last. So they do individual turning. So George, the Facebook group is there. We actually have a Discord server now that's a little bit more active. So I think it's midtn pen.club is the website now. That'll have the information if you could join the Discord, because then you It's a lot more active than Facebook because Facebook is weird how it shows stuff and when it chooses to show stuff. Yeah, I've been a dual watcher for quite some time. I've had some comments on YouTube before that they don't get it, but I view this one as a little computer. And I view this one because I have a collection of 9 or 10 different watches, mostly automatic, that, when I love my Apple Watch, but I also hated that my nicer watches were sitting unworn. So the older you get, the more you don't care about what other people think. And if I want to wear 2 watches, I'm good with that. No, there's a Rahul, the Pen Addict Slack, the watches channel in there. It can be kind of dangerous because, this is actually the Pen Addict watch that someone had on there and they were selling. There's actually quite a group of people, and I almost did it again. This is where I'm going to have to watch myself with talking and not paying attention and clean off this dip nib before I move on to the next ink, and actually tell you what the next ink is as well would be helpful. Olive Octopus Ink, who's in the chat, does Twitch streams, and she's mentioned on stream before how easy it is to go down a rabbit trail of talking about something, and I fully appreciate that much more now, because that's twice now in a row where I just get to talking and paying attention to the chat and kind of going on autopilot, and that was almost the second bottle of ink that I contaminated. But in terms of ink, this is Onyx, which is actually a really great black ink. For me, if I don't want to use Chaokuro, I'm probably going to choose Onyx as my ink of choice. I'm turning the mic down a little. I just noticed, I think when I said something there, it might have, hopefully it didn't blow anybody's ears. It looked like the level spiked a little bit higher than I would have liked. Rahul, I actually have a pen maker local to me who has an old lathe, who luckily they're gonna be able to help teach me, because I'd like to make pens not as a side hobby, just I like to tinker and like to learn things. So hopefully once we get it worked out, that's gonna come here, but I think I might actually go there and film a video about the process of making a pen with Nick Pasquale. So that will be really fun. I already own one of his pens. He's making me another custom one at the moment, but to be able to do a video of how the process works, and from starting with a blank to a finished pen, I think that'll be fun. Because I think he actually is considering creating like a class, or doing like a make your own pen event where you would sign up with him and go to his shop and go through the entire thing and leave with a pen. Okay. Yeah, and I actually know exactly what the blank is, and I can grab it from a drawer here in a second, and show. Over the 4th of July weekend, Needle Girl and her husband, she was in the chat earlier but had to go for a class, came up to Nashville to visit with Olive Octopus Ink, and I got to see them at a Butler Stationery did kind of like an open house on July 4th. It was like an extra pen club day, getting to hang out and talk pens, and Nick Pasquale's shop is only like a 5-minute drive away. So we actually ended up going there and pouring some custom blanks that Adam has one, Christy has one, Olive Octopus has one, and I have the fourth one. And they're all going to end up as pins at some point, I assume. But as for now, it's been a great back scratcher. I know that sounds bad, but it's in my drawer at my desk. And so that's been its current lot in life for the time being. But it was neat because we based the colors off Van Gogh's Starry Night, because that was the pattern of the dress that Christy happened to be wearing at the time. So it's kind of got those blues and yellows and oranges. Yeah, the web notebooks are not bad. They are decent pens. I have a half-finished one somewhere here in my collection of papers. When I first got into pens, I wrote on Rhodia. I didn't know better to explore papers, and I think that's why I've become such a proponent of that now. Because Rhodia is fine, but there's other papers that, for me, I think are better. But Rhodia is a great, that might be your preference, and that's all you need, and easily available. And yeah, you can't beat $5 for a mostly hardbound, decent performing paper. I've heard a lot of good things about the Daiso paper recently, Rahul. A lot of people are talking about that. We don't have a Daiso here. There is one in Atlanta, and since my family lives in that area now, there's a good chance next time I go down to see family, I'm also going to be having to stop in there. And there's also a Kinokuniya in the Atlanta area, which I have been to one of those in New York City last Thanksgiving. And that was the first stationery store we went to of like the 6 or 7. And it was a little bit overwhelming because it was such a large store and there was so much stuff. And, day one of a trip, you don't necessarily want to buy too much because you're going to other places. And so I don't even think we bought anything there. So that's another one at some point to go back and visit. My wife's side of the family, her niece and nephew both happen to live in New York City, so I'm sure we'll be going back there at some point, and then get to see Yoseka again, and Kinokuniya, and Nikko Nakaya, and the Lamy store, I guess, this no longer exists. We won't be going back there. But it was a fun little tour around New York City, just getting to between bookstores and stationery stores. We saw more of the city, I think, by going to all those places than we would have otherwise. And going over Thanksgiving, we weren't going to places that had a large tourist draw, so we didn't really have any crowded or anything like that. So that was another plus, going during a holiday and then not having to fight crowds. And George, since you're Nashville based, if you ever get a chance to make it out, definitely stop by the alternating things like Brew House South. Is this week. So I am relatively new to dip pens, Rahul. If Olive Octopus, I know said she was kind of listening in. If she's going to be the better, and if you go check her website, oliveoctopus.ink, she does a lot more ink swatching and testing with the calligraphy nibs and things like that. So she's going to be probably a better resource through her website, or if she's able to chime in on the chat from that side. I have a Kakamori and a Colorverse shuttle. Those are my only real dip nibs currently. Okay, so looks like we only have 2 more. So this next one is the Topaz, and it's a nice bright blue. Yeah, Lisa, if you're able to pop in, just Rahul had a question about an easy dip pin, and I know that's more your wheelhouse because you've experimented with all the different nibs and holders and things like that. Okay. So this is the Topaz, the second to the last ink of this brand. And luckily with doing these sheets the way that I'm doing, as I add more inks in the future, I can continue down the brand pages pretty easily. I do need to remember for next time to bust out one of the roller balls and highlight these lines underneath here, because some of these thicker papers, it's a little bit challenging to see the squares, especially this Nimacine paper. But that's why Nimacine is such great paper, because it's thick and it just holds ink so well. And this is another part I love about doing these streams. Able to watch and see people answering and asking questions for each other in the chat. That's cool. You know, the community aspect of this. The entire pin and stationery hobby, if everybody really wants to be helpful and help other people out, you know, which is great. And I have to say, I think this overhead camera is working so much better than the one I had before, because it hasn't cut out once. It seems to actually focus, and it seems like it shows color a little better than the last one. It's just getting better exposure. So we were talking about celebrating the wins earlier. Does that mean I need to treat myself and buy something at Gentleman Stationer on Saturday? Possibly. Okay. Okay, this is the last paper for Topaz. Then we get to the final ink, and it's the only one that has shimmer in it. And I left that last for a reason, so there's even less of a chance of cross-contaminating everything with... Cross-contaminating with an ink is bad. Cross-contaminating with a shimmer ink, I have to think, is much worse. And it also ties in with today being the last Pelikan Hub sign up like we were talking about. It's the ink from the Pelikan Hub of this last year. Okay. So let's remember this time and clean off the dip nib before moving on to the next part. And Rahul, you were talking about dual wearing watches. There's another person I've followed and kind of chatted with over on Instagram over the years, and they are a contributing editor for Worn and Wound, the YouTube channel about watches, and his name is Ed Jelly, and he posted something today where it turns your Apple Watch into like a modern pocket watch, which I thought was interesting. It's like a 3D printed little case, and it makes your Apple Watch into like a modern pocket watch. So that might be something, if you're into the dual watches, that you might find interesting. Okay, let me mute for a second and grab another drink real quick. Okay. So on to the final ink. And this one is the Edelstein Golden Lapis. So it's a nice bright blue with gold shimmer. And you can see when I turn the bottle up, all of that shimmer is nice and settled on the bottom. It looks like a little brick of gold. So if you're not familiar with shimmer inks, one of the most important things to do is shake it up before you swatch it, or hardly any of that shimmer would show up in your swatch. So and make sure your cap is on nice and tight before you shake an ink bottle around like this. And if you have a shimmer ink in a pen, obviously don't shake the pen around, just kind of roll it in your hands, something like this to kind of agitate. You don't want to shake, because then you'll be flinging ink out of the nib. Now, I am not the biggest shimmer ink consumer, but I have picked up enough of other people talking about it and do's and don'ts to know the highlights. And then just the shaking, agitating is important, but also, without thinking before, I did shake a pen and create a little bit of a mess. It was just non-shimmery mess, luckily. Okay, so I don't know if it's coming through. Let me see if I can. This is the one thing to be careful of too, is if you've shaken an ink, you can see all the bubbles that formed in there. Just keep that in mind, that those can pop and send ink little particles flying. So be very careful. And I'm just going to kind of stir this a little bit with the stirring rod. to hopefully make sure I get good amount of the shimmer on the swatch. Because the first time I really got into swatching was last year doing the Colorverse and Diamine ink vent calendars. And I have some of those swatches because I didn't really know better at the time that Diamine really likes to do the shimmers, and I wasn't seeing much of the shimmer because I wasn't properly agitating. And I was also using cotton swabs because I, once again, didn't know better to use something solid. I hadn't met Olive Octopus ink to learn about these glass stirring sticks and using solid swatching tools. So this year's ink vent calendars, well, I probably am not going to try and do an everyday video. Probably do it by the week or something like that, or maybe do a quick live stream each day, because then that's a little bit less editing and that part. The swatches overall should be better. And glad to see you there. Hopefully you heard earlier saying hello as you're driving down. Now, what is it you're going to? Because Rahul is actually in Houston and is the friend I mentioned earlier who's driving down to Houston from San Antonio for a pen event of some sort. Okay. And I know it's not going to be showing the best yet because it's kind of far away, but look at how some of these inks, the sheen coming through on these. That's what I love about doing this. You get to see all of that kind of come through on these different papers. Whatever paper this is, I'll look here in a second. It's really bringing out some sheen. I guess that's not sheen. That's a little bit of sheen, a little bit of shading. Oh, this is Tomoe 52. That makes sense why that one's showing it so well. Okay, this one's the Life Bank paper. Well, there you go, Rahul. You might be able to go meet a fellow pen person since it's next door to your office. Whatever that event is. Superior Labor, they make some really cool stuff that I've been interested in, but I don't yet own anything from them. I like some of their tote bags and whatnot, but I'm not really a tote bag person, so I don't have a use for that. So I have had self-control not to buy them, just to have them sitting around, but some like their pin clips and other accessory things like that. Eventually I'm going to break down and have to add some of that to my arsenal. As you can see, I'm still, even though I shook the bottle up just in this amount of time sitting here doing this, some of that shimmer is going to settle. So I'm making sure to stir it up before pulling out the stick for doing the sample. Okay, so it looks like this is the last paper here. And it's interesting with stirring this, you can almost feel the layer of glitter on the bottom. Sorry, the layer of shimmer on the bottom. Okay. So let's get this closed up. And then I'll get all the Montblanc sheets will be fully dry by now. I'll get those up and kind of show a comparison. And then hopefully these will have dried enough, especially so we can see if the shimmer is showing through on this golden lapis. The last one we did, the earlier ink should have had enough dry time by now, but get this cleaned off here real quick. That's one thing, luckily, when I lived in Houston, I didn't really have to go into downtown because I lived far enough out. I mean, most of that time I couldn't drive, but I never really had a need to go into Houston proper, because having driven in Atlanta proper, having driven in Los Angeles during college, I went to visit a friend who was doing a class out there, and while he was in class, I had access to his car. I'm good with that. I don't need to drive in Los Angeles anymore. Okay, so just put this up here for the time being. Put my templates and swatching cards off to the side. Okay, so here's the Montblanc. Slide these over so the chat box is not blocking this bottom right sheet. You can see all the colors show through well, and on some of these papers, and I'll hold them over, even I'm surprised that this one is showing it as well as it does. Just the shading on this plotter paper is kind of surprising. You can see the lines coming through on almost all of them. And then we don't have any inks that are really completely showing a different color, like on the Iroful paper. That's something that can happen at times. But like this one, the Beatles purple on here, Is it showing up? For some reason that camera is showing really dark. Let me try the overhead and see if I can just hold it up to show. Yeah, you can see the golden like circle in that Beatles purple, and then the Enzo Ferrari next to it doing that as well. So just very neat how these, you know, the different papers show off the different qualities of the colors. Like the Enzo Ferrari on these two, you can see the kind of goldish undertones come out where you don't see it like on the Iroful. So that would be one of the big differences. You don't see the Montblanc from BMW. You're not seeing the same kind of shading come out on the Iroful. You see more shading on the Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So it's just interesting to see how they come through. The green seems to be lighter, and I think that's a common thing on Iroful papers, is it shows more blues and not as much greens. But let's see. So let's get these set aside and pull up the Pelikan ones that hopefully have dried enough for us at least to get a good view of them. Okay, so already I can see that from the overhead camera view it shows well enough that we got plenty of the shimmer and the golden lapis. You don't really see it when you're putting the ink on the page. It kind of dries and then the gold comes out like on this Life Bank paper here. I mean, to kind of catch the light at the right angle, look at all that gold on the bottom. You're seeing it on all of them, but it's really popping out on that one, and then on the Tomoe 852, but that's to be expected because it's, you know, it's kind of a standard for papers. I mean, all of the inks just look wonderful in this, but that shimmer is really coming through, and even the onyx is a black ink showing variation. That's just kind of crazy. It's got a little bit of a brownish, almost a rose gold undertone on it, which unfortunately I don't think this. No, there we go. Okay, you can kind of see it's got a rose gold hue on this top right corner here, and that's from a black ink. So that's kind of crazy to see, but the rest of these, you know, behaved very well. The 4001 on the Life Bank, you don't really see much shading come through on there. It's the Yu-Sari is showing it really well, and the topaz, you can see how well the shading is on the topaz there, kind of coming through in that bottom left. And actually holding that paper up shows that pretty well. So let me just do that with each of these. So there you can really see the golden lapis shining through, literally. See a little bit of a touch of possibly the rose gold and the onyx. The olivine on this one dried really dark. It's got a little bit more blue on the plotter paper as the olivine dried. In fact, it looks similar to the aquamarine next to it. But overall, you know, this is what I love about this, seeing the variation on the different papers and how it's coming through. So let me set these aside, and I'm going to talk about a video I'm currently working on that I started on Sunday, and for this entire week until next Sunday, I'm only using 6 pens, and they're all entry-level pens. And it has been a surprising experience so far of how I can't say that I'm missing my higher end pins, which is crazy to think. So these are the pins that I've been using this week. Got 3 pilots and 3 platinums. So 3 Cucuños, 2 in extra fine, 1 in fine, and then 3 preppies, 2 in 0.3 and 1 in 0.5. Now, I realized that I probably should have ordered some 0.2s to get a little bit more accurate side by side, but I don't envision this video being a which one's better type scenario. It's more of trying the entry level pins with cartridges only, and to emulate. Say you're enabling somebody, you have somebody who works with you and they're curious about fountain pens. Well, a preppy is like $6 or $7 depending on where you get it. It comes with a cartridge. So handing somebody one of these and say, here, try it. You don't really have anything to lose. That's less than buying them a cup of coffee if you're walking to the coffee shop next door or something like that. And it's been really surprising how well these work in terms of writing. Now, I did have to change a cartridge out on my black Cucuño Extra Fine today because I had a few days of writing with it before I started the week. And using that is kind of what gave me the idea to do this video. So I know that Olive Octopus, she was talking about she's been using preppies and they just write so well. Anybody else in the chat, do you have your Cucuños or your preppies that you keep in your rotation even if you have other pens? Because I can already tell that once this week is done, I might throw a converter in some of these, but these write so great. I don't see why I would stop using them in a rotation, because like they fit in the plotter loop. This is my Bible size. Like they fit in there well enough. In the plastic, it slides out. So I kind of have a bag that I picked up from Well Appointed Desk. A bag that I'll take my plotters downstairs with me at night. I take my laptop down, my plotters, so that way I have them. And if I need to write something, and I've just been throwing, one of the Cucuños or the preppies in here and kind of carrying a different color down, so I have at least 2 colors with me, and it's been great. And in terms of how they're writing, I mean, you can see on this, and let me hold it up, that 0.5 preppy is more of a medium nib, which with my writing, it's definitely a lot larger. So, I think a 0.2 and 0.3 would have been a better comparison for me. So next time, I order from somewhere that has the 0.2s, I'll probably pick a couple of those up. Gentleman Stationer just had the 0.3s and 0.5s, but still, the preppy 0.3 still writes with a pretty fine line. So can't really see. I'm not disappointed in any way. And that is something else that I'm working on. If you've ever seen my extra fine nib video, I'm also plotting out the remake. So the first one was 15 different nibs. I'm going to try my best. Currently I have 25 different extra fine nibs listed to do a better comparison. And then I'm going to be including some nib grinds this time. I've got a couple from Matthew Chin. A pen club friend is going to let me borrow his Nagahara needlepoint. So if you love eyedroppers, Rahul, have you ever used any of the Opus 88s? Yeah. Opus 88s. I love the Opus 88s. I have actually, I'm approaching in October will be my year anniversary from getting my first Opus 88 at the Pelikan Hub, which was the Minty. And since then, I have a Demonstrator, an Omar, a Coloro, and I feel like I have one more. I need to get a Mini. I've delayed since I've been doing the interviews on the YouTube channel. I want to pick up the mini that Gourmet Pins sells in her shop, because I've been getting a pin or an item from pretty much everybody I've interviewed in some way. So I think that's going to be the mini that I'll end up ordering, that I probably should do soon, since that'll be coming from Canada. But, you know, they just write so well. Their nibs are some of the best tuned Yovo nibs coming from a production pin that I've encountered. They all write just wonderfully. Now, in my demo right now, or my demo, I currently have a Franklin Christoph Extra Fine Sig nib in there. And that just is even a better experience of having the little bit of variation in there, as well as the, the extra fine. And just, so if you've never tried, if you like small nibs like extra fines, definitely look into the Franklin Christoph EF Sig grind. I think they're about $60-ish. You can put it on anything that takes a Yovo 6, and they are great. So that's mostly what I had for this evening. If you have any other questions, because that's something I want to do coming up, is I want to do one of these Thursdays as a question and answer type episode or stream. I'm going to post on the community thread on YouTube, a call for people to list some questions that they might have, either about the channel or about my background in pins or anything like that, to be able to answer on one of these Thursday streams. Because I'd like to break it up a little bit, where I'm not just swatching every time, an episode on Franken pins. I can do that somewhat, because technically any pin can easily become a Franken pin if you are throwing different nibs on different bodies. I don't have any of the, like, I know Gourmet Pins was talking about on our interview. She was getting prepped for the DC Pin Show, where she had the Pilot Parallel nibs in her Opus 88s. So you had the huge capacity combined with the, one of the least expensive nibs. But I'll definitely add that. So if you see that community post, definitely leave a comment on there. I'm thinking that'll probably be a couple weeks from now, just to give time to get enough questions kind of filled in on there. Because I think that would be a nice change of pace. I've had a couple people, when I was doing the interviews, want to know my answers to kind of the entry questions that I was asking them. So I might incorporate that into that live stream type video. And actually, let me switch over to I can talk to you as I'm saying this, switching over and doing that kind of, those standard questions that I asked at the beginning while doing the interview itself. I'm gonna have to turn back and forth because I can't see the chat as well from this view. But if you have any other questions too, leave them in the chat here. But the chat here is not as easy to reference. So once I make that post, which I'll probably do tomorrow, be great if you could drop them in there, and that way I can formulate a good question list to kind of plan. And then, of course, with it being a Q&A, it can take questions from the chat at that time as well, after I've kind of done the prepared questions, just to get a good mixture. But if there's nothing else for now, I think that might be it for tonight. I appreciate all of you who've been able to watch and follow along as I've been going through this. My paper plotter, or my ink and paper plotter, is going to be much better suited for Pin Club this Saturday. It's going to have a lot more contents in it, and I'm at the point too where, since I've been doing these 6 papers, there's a couple of them that I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit all of these in there by the time I swatch everything. So I might have to pull out something like maybe the plotter paper and the Nimacine, and just leave the more fountain pen specialty papers in there. The Tomoe, the Iroful, the Yu-Sari, and the bank paper. Maybe take out the bank paper since it's on the, the discontinued scale, and just leave that as kind of my own personal reference. But until I run out of space, I'll keep them all in there just to have it as I'm going through this. And then eventually I'll probably have to decide what my bank paper replacement will be and put that in there. And then also, as other papers come out, like these little bullet jotter tablets that Gentleman Stationers had, you can see this one is the meringue paper. And I had a couple of sheets of the Canopus that was in my video recently, just kind of talking through that system. And I really liked the Canopus, how it performed. So once that's available, and probably that'll be after San Francisco seems to be the general consensus, that might be an option for getting that in an A5 or an A4 to be able to cut down to A5 size to include in the swatching. Because I could see that, people are saying it's kind of a Cosmo Airlight replacement, which unfortunately I didn't know at the time to try Cosmo Airlight. So I've seen it, but I never got a chance to really experiment with it myself. So, getting on the front end of the follow-up is never a bad plan. So I think then I'm going to leave everybody with that for tonight. I appreciate you, watching along, and hopefully you're able to come back next Thursday as well to kind of join in with the topic. And I'll probably get that scheduled once I decide what next Thursday will be. I was making a list today of what all ink brands I still need to do that are not ink vent calendars. You can see over my shoulder here, that's an ink shelf. It's all the different inks, and you can see my big Rolodex of the coloring cards there as well. So that's something I'll do as a video at some point, just kind of going through the color decks, because I want to make an idea I got from Olive Octopus Ink doing pen cards as well for one side of that, since it is the dual side Rolodex. Rahul, I think being in the Caribbean is a perfect excuse to not watch a live stream. Hopefully you have a good trip. That I would never, if you watched a stream from the Caribbean, I would be upset. That would, as much as I appreciate support from people, take your time for all of us. Yeah, Ernie, I have the Iroful and the way colors show, and that's where I don't know if did Cosmo Airlight not let colors change the same way like Iroful does. Like I always use the Teranishi Guitar Gentle Green, that in Iroful it shows as blue, and on everything else as it dries it kind of turns into a green with some shading. So that's kind of become my sounding bell, and that's why I use that on all my swatches, just because I've seen that behavior on that paper, so that way I have that consistency. So but okay, well, once again I appreciate everybody joining in, and I'll see you next week on the next stream.